The cold metal of the fire escape bit into Viviana Nell's palms as she hauled herself up another floor, lungs screaming, pulse hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Below, footsteps echoed through the alley, voices barking commands in a language she had only recently learned to fear. 3 weeks ago, she had been a graduate student cataloging medieval manuscripts in the university's special collections basement. Then she had opened the wrong book, photographed the wrong page, and discovered that the world contained far older things than she had ever imagined. Things with teeth, things with laws, things that did not take kindly to humans stumbling onto their secrets. She reached the rooftop and threw herself over the ledge, scraping her knees bloody on the gravel. The building across the narrow gap stood dark and silent, some kind of historical landmark closed for renovations. Perfect. She backed up, took 3 running steps, and jumped. For one terrible moment she hung suspended over the 4-story drop, wind whipping her dark hair across her face. Then her hands caught the opposite ledge and she dragged herself over, biting back a sob of relief. The rooftop door had been forced open already, hanging crooked on its hinges. Viviana slipped inside and down a marble staircase that smelled of dust and old stone. The building had once been something grand, she could tell. High ceilings, ornate molding, the kind of architecture that spoke of old money and older secrets. Now it stood hollow, filled with shadows and the particular silence of abandoned places. She could still hear them. Somehow, they always found her, no matter how far she ran or how carefully she hid. The hunters serving the Vampire Council did not give up, did not tire, did not stop. She had violated the first law, the covenant that kept the vampire world hidden from human eyes. The penalty was death, swift and final, no appeals, no mercy. The staircase spiraled down into darkness. Viviana felt along the wall, found another door, pushed through into what must have been a grand ballroom once. Moonlight filtered through boarded windows, painting silver stripes across a floor thick with dust. She crossed it quickly, searching for another exit, another hiding place, anything. A sound above made her freeze. The scrape of boot on marble. They were inside. Viviana ran, no longer caring about stealth, only speed. She found another staircase, this one narrower, servants' quarters probably, and plunged down into absolute blackness. Down and down, the air growing colder, the smell changing from dust to earth to something older still. Stone, deep stone. She must be below street level now, in the building's foundations. Her searching hands found a door, wood so old it felt like iron under her fingertips. She pushed and it swung open with a groan that seemed to echo forever. The room beyond stole her breath. It was a crypt, a proper Gothic crypt, all vaulted ceilings and carved pillars, lit by some ambient glow she could not identify. The architecture was far older than the building above, as though the mansion had been built deliberately over this ancient space. At the room's center stood a raised platform, and on the platform sat a coffin. Not a coffin, she realized as she crept closer. A sarcophagus carved from a single piece of black stone that seemed to drink the light. Silver inlay traced patterns across its surface, symbols she half recognized from the manuscript that had destroyed her life. Vampire glyphs, royal seals. Footsteps echoed in the stairwell behind her. Viviana looked around wildly. The crypt had no other exits, no windows, nowhere to hide. Nothing but stone walls and that impossible sarcophagus. She heard voices now, cold and professional, calling coordinates to each other. Seconds, maybe. That was all she had. She ran to the sarcophagus and pushed at the lid. It did not budge. She pushed harder, throwing her whole weight against it, and felt it shift with a grinding sound that seemed to shake the foundations. She got her fingers under the edge and pulled, muscles shrieking, and the massive lid slid aside just far enough. The gap was barely wide enough for her body. Viviana did not let herself think. She grabbed the edge and pulled herself up, swinging her legs into the opening, sliding down into darkness and cold that hit her like a physical blow. Her feet touched something soft. Fabric. Cushioning. She was standing on silk and velvet, she realized, grave goods fit for royalty. And beneath that, something else. Something that shifted slightly under her weight. A body. Viviana clapped both hands over her mouth to stop the scream. The lid was still open a crack, spilling in just enough light for her to see. The sarcophagus was deep, deeper than seemed possible, and she was standing on layers of fabric that covered a form beneath, a large form, tall, broad-shouldered. The voices were in the crypt now. With trembling hands, Viviana reached up and pulled at the lid. It resisted, too heavy, at the wrong angle. She braced her feet carefully to either side of the body beneath her and pushed upward with all her strength. The lid groaned and slid, inch by grinding inch, until it settled back into place with a final boom that she felt in her bones. Absolute darkness swallowed her. Absolute silence, but for her own ragged breathing. She stood very still, trying not to think about what she was standing on, trying not to imagine dead hands reaching up from beneath the silk, trying not to panic in the enclosed space that pressed around her like a fist. Outside the sarcophagus, she heard the hunters enter the crypt, heard them walking around the room, checking corners, their footsteps sharp and purposeful. One of them said something in that other language, the words harsh and clipped. Another responded. They were right outside now, circling the sarcophagus. A hand touched the stone above her head. She heard fingers trailing across the lid, testing the seals. Viviana held her breath until her lungs burned. The darkness seemed to press against her eyes. She could feel her heart beating so hard it shook her whole body. Could they hear it? Could they sense her somehow, smell her fear through the stone? Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the footsteps retreated. The voices faded, moving back toward the stairs. She heard the distant sound of the door closing, then nothing. She waited, counting heartbeats, forcing herself to stay still even as every instinct screamed at her to get out, to get away from the dead thing beneath her feet. When she had counted to 1,000, she finally let herself breathe normally. She reached up, searching for the edge of the lid, thinking she might be able to shift it enough to slip back out. Beneath her, something moved. Viviana went absolutely rigid. She had imagined it, surely, post-mortem settling, fabric shifting under her weight, anything but what her hindbrain was screaming at her. The body beneath her drew a breath. It was a small sound, quiet as a whisper, but in the absolute silence of the sarcophagus, it might as well have been thunder. The chest beneath the silk rose and fell, once, twice. Something stirred in the darkness below her. Viviana's mind went white with terror. She scrabbled at the lid, pushing, pulling, no longer caring about noise or caution. She had to get out, had to get away. The lid would not move. She was sealed in, trapped in a stone box with something that was waking up. A hand closed around her ankle. She did scream then. She could not help it. A short, sharp sound of pure animal panic. The hand was strong, impossibly strong, but careful. It did not grab or clutch. It simply held, warm fingers circling her ankle like a shackle. A voice spoke from the darkness below, male and deep and rough with something that might have been centuries of sleep. Be still. The words were accented, old-fashioned, the vowels shaped differently than modern speech, but clear. A command that cut through her panic like a blade. Viviana froze, every muscle locked, still balanced on the balls of her feet with that hand wrapped around her ankle. "You are standing on me," the voice continued, with what might have been amusement threading through the words. "I would appreciate it if you would not." She tried to speak, and could only manage a squeak. The hand released her ankle, and she felt movement below, the rustle of fabric, a sense of mass shifting. She stumbled, lost her balance in the pitch darkness, and fell. She did not hit the bottom of the sarcophagus. Instead, she fell against something solid and warm, an arm catching her with inhuman speed, steadying her. She could feel a body now, very close in the darkness, could feel the presence of someone large and powerful, radiating heat that should not exist in a tomb. "I apologize for the accommodations." That voice again, closer now, almost directly above her. "I was not expecting company." A sound like flint striking, and light bloomed. He was holding something, a small silver device that produced a flame, like a lighter but brighter. In its glow, Viviana finally saw the face of the thing she had awakened. Her breath stopped. He was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. all sharp edges and elegant lines, inhumanly perfect. White hair fell past his shoulders, white as frost, white as bone. His skin matched it, pale as marble, luminous in the flame light. His eyes were dark, nearly black, watching her with an intensity that made her feel pinned like a butterfly. He wore clothes from another century, fine fabric and careful tailoring, all black and silver, and when he smiled, she saw the teeth. "Hello," said the vampire. "You seem distressed." Viviana could not find words, could not find breath. She was pressed against his chest in the confined space of the sarcophagus, close enough to see that his eyes were not black, but a deep, deep red, like garnets, like old blood. He studied her face with what seemed like genuine curiosity, tilting his head in a gesture that was eerily predatory. "You are human, young, frightened, running from something, I presume, to have taken refuge in my resting place." His gaze sharpened. "Running from my kind, unless I miss my guess." She managed a jerky nod. "Hunters?" Another nod. "Ah." He shifted slightly, adjusting his position so they were not quite so entangled, though in the narrow confines of the sarcophagus there was only so much distance to be had. "The council's dogs, then. You have broken their precious laws." "I didn't mean to," Viviana whispered, finding her voice at last. "I didn't know. I'm a researcher. I just found something I shouldn't have. I didn't understand what it was until it was too late." Those red eyes studied her, reading something in her face. "The truth," he said, as though confirming it to himself. "How refreshing." He seemed to consider for a moment, then the flame winked out. "They will not have gone far. They know you entered this building. They will search thoroughly, and they will return here eventually. The seals on this sarcophagus will hold for a time, but not forever, and they will sense if I break them from within." Terror flooded back. "They'll find me. Very likely." A pause. "Unless I prevent it. Why would you help me?" She could feel him in the darkness, could sense the power radiating off him like heat from a forge. "You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but I know the council, and I have little love for their hunters." Something shifted in his tone, cold and hard. "They grow too bold, too certain of their authority. I am not fond of being disturbed from my rest, but I am even less fond of their presumption." Viviana tried to process this, tried to think through her panic. "Who are you?" Silence for a long moment, then quietly, "I am Obereth Wormwood. Perhaps you have heard the name in your research." She had. Oh God, she had. Viviana felt the blood drain from her face. Obereth Wormwood, the vampire king of the eastern realms, ancient beyond measure, powerful beyond imagining. The manuscript she had found had mentioned him, had listed him among the oldest of the old ones, the first generation, the pure bloods. The text had described him as ruthless, absolute, a creature of immense power who answered to no council, bowed to no authority, and she was trapped in a coffin with him. "I see you have," he said, and she could hear something like dark amusement in his voice. "Do not fear. I am not hungry, and I do not make a habit of killing terrified girls who stumble into my resting place." A pause. "Not usually, at any rate." She could not tell if he was joking. "The hunters," he continued, "all business now." "How many?" "I don't know. At least 5. Maybe more." "Armed?" "Yes. Silver bullets, I think. Stakes. Other things." "Modern weapons as well?" "Guns, yes." She heard him make a considering sound. "Troublesome? And they serve the council directly?" "I think so. They've been chasing me for days, ever since I was flagged in their system." "Their system grows more sophisticated every year." He did not sound pleased about it. "Very well. Here is what will happen. You will remain here with me until nightfall. The seals will hide your presence. When darkness comes, I will wake fully and deal with any watchers they have left behind. Then I will see you to safety." "Why?" Viviana asked again, because she needed to understand, needed something to make sense. Why would you risk yourself for a human you don't know? The darkness seemed to deepen around her. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. Because you sought sanctuary in my resting place, and that means something, in the old ways. Because I am tired of the council and their small tyrannies. And because... A slight pause. I find I'm curious about you, little scholar. What manner of knowledge could be worth the council's death sentence? She told him haltingly about the manuscript, about the genealogies and the bloodlines, the true history of vampire kind that contradicted everything the council claimed, about the photographs she had taken before she realized what she had found, photos that were now scattered across her cloud storage, her email, her academic networks. He listened in silence, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "You found the Codex Sanguinis." I don't know what it was called. It was in Latin, medieval Latin, mixed with other languages I didn't recognize. The Blood Codex, the original histories from before the council, before the laws. We thought all copies had been destroyed centuries ago. She felt him shift, could sense him processing this. If what you say is true, and those images still exist in your electronic archives, then you are far more dangerous to them than you realize. They will not stop hunting you. Ever. The words settled over her like ice water. Then I'm dead. Not necessarily. His voice took on a different quality, thoughtful and calculated. You said the images are scattered across multiple systems? Yes. Automatic backups, cloud storage, email. I'd sent some to my advisor before I understood what they were. Then destroying you accomplishes nothing for them. The knowledge is already disseminated. She heard something that might have been satisfaction in his tone. How delightfully complicated. They cannot afford to kill you quietly and be done with it. They must track down every copy, every person you contacted, which means they need you alive and cooperative. They didn't seem interested in cooperation, Viviana said, remembering the cold efficiency with which they had hunted her. They did not know this detail, I suspect. You have been running, not talking. Yes? She nodded, then realized he could not see her in the darkness. Yes. Then that is your leverage, should you need it. But it also makes you valuable in other ways. His hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers cool and strong as they wrapped around hers. Sleep now. You are safe here, I promise you this. When you wake, we will speak more of what is to be done. I can't sleep, Viviana protested, even as exhaustion crashed over her in waves. She had been running for days, sleeping in snatches, always afraid. I'm standing in a coffin with a vampire king who could kill me without thinking. I could, he agreed calmly, but I will not. You have my word, for whatever you deem that worth. His hand tightened slightly on hers. And you are no longer standing. Sit. Rest. I will keep watch. She realized he was right. At some point during their conversation, she had sunk down, her legs folding under her, until she was sitting in the curve of the sarcophagus with his arm around her shoulders, steadying her. The position should have been terrifying. Instead, wrapped in darkness and the strange warmth radiating from him, she felt something like safety for the first time in days. Her eyes closed without her permission. The last thing she felt was his hand gentle on her hair, smoothing it back from her face with surprising tenderness. When Viviana woke, she was lying down, her head pillowed on something soft. For a confused moment, she thought she was back in her apartment, safe in her own bed. Then memory crashed back and she jerked upright. Light. There was light in the sarcophagus now, a soft glow that seemed to emanate from the silver inlay on the interior walls. Impossible, but no more impossible than anything else. She was lying on layers of silk and velvet that lined the stone, and Obereth was sitting beside her, watching her with those unsettling red eyes. In the light she could see him more clearly. He was even more striking than she had realized, his features perfect in that uncanny way of very old vampires, as though time had refined him down to his essential elements. He had changed position while she slept, or perhaps made her more comfortable. The sarcophagus was larger on the inside than it had seemed. The interior space somehow expanded beyond what the exterior dimensions should allow. Magic, she thought. Old magic worked into the stone itself. "You let me sleep," she said, her voice rough. "You needed it." He tilted his head, studying her. "You have been running on fear and adrenaline for days. Your body was near collapse." "What time is it?" "Dusk. The sun has just set." He rose in one fluid movement, somehow managing grace even in the confined space. "The hunters left watchers as I suspected. 2 of them in the building above. They are armed and alert." A slight pause. "They will not be a problem." Viviana pushed herself upright, her body protesting. "You're going to kill them." "Would you prefer I did not?" He asked it genuinely, as though her opinion mattered. "They hunt you. They would kill you without hesitation if given the chance. I can remove the threat, or I can avoid them and leave your enemies in place. Your choice." She struggled with it, with the casual way he spoke of killing, with the knowledge that those men outside would absolutely murder her if they found her. "I don't want anyone to die because of me." Admirable, if impractical. Obereth studied her for a long moment. "Very well. I will incapacitate them, nothing more. They will wake in several hours with headaches and bruised pride. Acceptable?" She nodded, relieved and disturbed in equal measure. "Then remain here while I work." He reached up and the lid of the sarcophagus slid aside as though weightless, revealing the crypt above. He rose from the stone in one smooth motion, moving with speed and grace that made her breath catch. He looked back down at her, his white hair falling around his shoulders. "Do not leave this place until I return. The seals will protect you." Then he was gone, moving too fast for her eyes to track. Viviana waited in the silence of the crypt, counting her heartbeats, trying not to imagine what was happening above. She heard nothing. No sounds of struggle, no cries, nothing. Just silence stretching out. Then he was back, appearing beside the sarcophagus as suddenly as he had left. "Done. They will trouble you no further tonight." He extended a hand. "Come. We should not linger." She took his hand and let him pull her from the sarcophagus. His grip was firm, careful of his strength, and he steadied her when she stumbled on stiff legs. This close, she could see details she had missed before. The silver embroidery on his clothes worked in patterns that matched the seals on his resting place. The way his eyes caught the ambient light like a cat's. The absolute stillness of him when he was not moving. No breath, no heartbeat, no unconscious human fidgeting. He was watching her watch him, she realized. "You are remarkably calm," he observed. "Most humans cannot bear to be this close to my kind." "I'm terrified," Viviana admitted. "I'm just too tired to show it properly." Something flickered in his expression, there and gone too fast to read. "Honest again? You make a terrible liar, little scholar." "Viviana," she said. "My name is Viviana Nell." "Viviana." He said it slowly, tasting the syllables. "It suits you." He released her hand and moved toward the crypt door. "Come. I have a place you will be safe, at least for a time. We have much to discuss." She followed him through the door and up the servants' staircase, her legs protesting every step. The mansion was pitch dark, but he moved through it as easily as if it were full daylight, never hesitating, never stumbling. She struggled to keep up, her human eyes useless in the blackness. He must have sensed her difficulty because he slowed, then stopped entirely. "Forgive me. I forget the limitations." Before she could ask what he meant, he had turned and in one smooth motion lifted her into his arms. Viviana made an undignified squeaking sound. "What are you doing?" "Carrying you. It will be faster." He started forward again, moving at a pace that would have been a run for her, made effortless by his strength. "Unless you object." She should object, should demand to be put down, should maintain some dignity. Instead, she found herself relaxing into his hold, too exhausted to fight, too overwhelmed to care. He carried her as though she weighed nothing, his arms steady and sure, and she let her head rest against his shoulder, because what did pride matter now? They emerged from the mansion into a night that smelled of rain and city exhaust. Obereth moved through shadows like he was part of them, avoiding the few streetlights, keeping to the darkness. Viviana caught glimpses of familiar landmarks and realized they were moving deeper into the old quarter, the part of the city where medieval buildings huddled between modern high-rises, where history pressed up against the present. He stopped before a building she recognized, an old Gothic church that had been deconsecrated decades ago. The windows were dark, the doors chained. Obereth approached the side entrance, and the chains simply fell away at his touch, rusted metal parting like paper. Inside, the air was cool and still, smelling of old incense and older stone. He set her down gently and led her through the nave to a door that she had walked past 100 times as a student, never knowing it was there. It blended seamlessly with the stone wall, visible only when you knew where to look. Beyond the door, stairs descended into darkness. Obereth produced that silver flame device again and led her down into depths that should not exist beneath the church. Down and down, far below the water table, into spaces carved from living rock. The staircase ended in a chamber that stole her breath for the second time that night. It was beautiful, a cathedral in miniature, all soaring arches and delicate stonework. Furniture stood arranged in careful clusters, antiques that belonged in museums. Tapestries covered the walls, medieval work preserved perfectly in the cool darkness. Candles lit themselves as Obereth entered, flames springing to life along the walls, casting warm light over everything. "Welcome to my home," he said simply. "Such as it is." Viviana turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "You live here? Under the church? I have many residences, scattered across the world. This is merely one of them." He moved to a cabinet and withdrew a bottle, crystal glasses. "But it is secure, warded with protections laid down centuries ago. The council's hunters cannot find you here." She watched as he poured dark liquid into both glasses. "I thought vampires didn't eat or drink anything but blood." "We do not require other sustenance, but we can consume it." He offered her one of the glasses. "Wine. Very old wine, but I think you will find it palatable." Viviana took the glass because her hands needed something to hold. The wine was rich and complex, tasting of things she could not name. She sank into one of the chairs because her legs were shaking again. "What happens now?" Obereth settled into the chair opposite her with inhuman grace. "Now we determine what to do with you." He studied her over the rim of his glass. "The council wants you dead or silenced. I have no particular allegiance to the council, but that alone does not constitute a solution to your problem." "Could I give them what they want?" Viviana asked desperately. "Delete everything. Swear to keep silent." "Do you believe they would trust that?" She thought of the cold efficiency with which she had been hunted, the absolute determination. "No. Neither do I." He set down his glass. "Which leaves us with limited options. You can run perpetually, always looking over your shoulder. You can die. Or you can find a way to make yourself valuable enough to the right people that the council cannot touch you." "Valuable how?" His eyes glinted in the candlelight. "You found the Codex Sanguinis. You have academic credentials, access to archives and institutions. You have a mind that can piece together secrets from fragmentary evidence." He leaned forward slightly. "There are factions within vampire society who would pay dearly for that kind of skill. Factions with the power to shield you from the council's reach." "You," Viviana said, understanding. "You mean you. I mean me." He did not look away, did not soften it. "I have been asleep for the better part of a century, Viviana. I withdrew from politics, from the games and machinations, because I grew weary of them. But the world has changed in my absence, and I find I do not care for the direction it has taken. The council grows bold. They enforce laws I never agreed to, suppress knowledge that should be preserved. They hunt you for the crime of learning, of seeing too much. This offends me. So you want to use me to strike at them." "I want to protect you," he corrected, "because you sought sanctuary in my resting place, and because the old laws mean something to me, even if they mean nothing to the council." If, in the process of keeping you alive, I also gain a scholar who can help me understand how the world has shifted in my absence, how the power structures have changed, what secrets the council is so desperate to hide." He spread his hands. "Is that so terrible a bargain?" Viviana wanted to say yes, wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some independence. But she was a realist, and she knew exactly how thin her options were. "What would you want from me? Your expertise? Your research skills? Your knowledge of modern systems and institutions?" He paused. "Your honesty. I find I have little tolerance for sycophants and liars. And in exchange? Protection, resources, a place in my household such as it is, safety from the council and any other threats." His gaze held hers. "And my word that I will not harm you, not feed from you without permission, not use you as anything other than what we agree upon." It was more than she had any right to expect, more than she had hoped for. "Why?" she asked for the third time. "Why offer so much to a stranger?" Obereth was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, more thoughtful. "Because you did not beg. When you woke in my sarcophagus, you were terrified, but you did not grovel or plead or offer yourself in exchange for your life. You stood your ground as much as you could, and you spoke truth even when lies might have served you better." He tilted his head, studying her. "Because in 300 years of existence I have met very few humans who interested me, and fewer still who surprised me. You have done both." Viviana felt heat rise in her cheeks, a blush she could not control. "I wasn't trying to be interesting. I was trying not to die." "I know." Something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "Which is precisely why you are." She looked down at her hands, at the wine glass she was gripping too tightly. Everything in her training, in her life, told her this was insane. You did not make deals with vampires, especially not vampire kings, especially not when you were desperate and cornered. But what choice did she have? Run until the hunters caught her? Turn herself in and hope for mercy she knew would never come? At least with Obereth she had a chance. "All right," she said quietly. "I accept." He inclined his head, a gesture that managed to be both acknowledgement and something like approval. "Then we have an accord." He rose and moved to a desk in the corner, returning with paper and pen. "We will formalize it, if you do not mind, a contract, binding in the old way. I find modern agreements too easy to break." They spent the next hour working through terms, negotiating details with a care that surprised her. He was thorough but fair, and when she pushed back on something he listened, considered, sometimes yielded. By the time they finished, she had a document that guaranteed her safety, her autonomy, her right to leave if she chose, all in exchange for her services as a researcher and advisor. He signed it with a fountain pen, his handwriting elegant and archaic. Then he pricked his thumb with one sharp nail and pressed it to the bottom of the page. Blood welled up, impossibly red, and soaked into the paper. The document glowed for a moment, silver light racing along the words, then faded. "A blood seal," he explained. "It cannot be broken without destroying the one who breaks it. My word, made binding." Viviana took the pen with shaking hands and signed her name below his. The document glowed again, accepting her signature, sealing the bargain. "It is done." Obereth took the paper and placed it carefully in the desk. "You are under my protection now, Viviana Nell. Any who harm you answer to me." She felt the weight of it settle over her, heavier than any legal contract, more real than any promise. She had bound herself to a vampire king, tied her fate to his. It should have terrified her. Instead, strangely, she felt safe for the first time in days. Obereth showed her to a room that had been prepared somehow, as though he had known she would accept. A bed with clean linens, a wardrobe stocked with clothes in her size, a bathroom with running water and modern fixtures that seemed wildly out of place in the medieval setting. Everything she needed, all waiting. "Rest," he told her, pausing in the doorway. "Tomorrow we will begin to unravel this mystery of yours. Tonight, you are safe. Sleep without fear." She wanted to ask how he could promise that, wanted to voice all the doubts and questions still churning in her mind. But exhaustion was dragging at her again, and the bed looked impossibly inviting. "Thank you," she said instead, "for everything." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You are welcome, little scholar. Sleep well." He closed the door softly behind him, leaving her alone. Viviana stood in the center of the room for a long moment, trying to process everything that had happened. 12 hours ago, she had been running for her life. Now she was under the protection of one of the most powerful vampires in existence, bound by contract and blood to serve him. She should have been terrified, should have been planning her escape, looking for the trap, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Instead, she found herself thinking about the care with which he had negotiated their contract, the gentleness with which he had carried her through the dark, the way he had listened when she spoke, really listened, as though her opinions mattered, the way he had offered her a choice, even when he could have simply taken what he wanted. Dangerous thoughts, thoughts that led nowhere good. She pushed them aside and climbed into bed, letting exhaustion claim her. Tomorrow would bring new complications, new dangers, new questions to answer. Tonight, for the first time in days, she could sleep without fear. In the main chamber, Obereth sat alone with his thoughts and a glass of wine he did not drink. The girl, Viviana, was asleep in the guest room, her heartbeat slow and steady, her breathing deep. Safe, protected. He had not lied to her, but he had not told her everything either, had not mentioned how long it had been since he last felt curiosity about another being, had not explained that he had woken from his rest not because of her presence, but because something about her had called to him, something he did not yet understand, had not admitted that when he had first opened his eyes in the darkness of the sarcophagus and found her standing there, terrified but defiant, something had shifted in him. Some part of himself he had thought dead had stirred back to life. He rose and moved to the window, though there was nothing to see beyond the stone wall. 100 years of sleep, and he woke to find the world changed and a frightened scholar in his coffin. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. She had called herself a researcher, a cataloger of old manuscripts, but he had seen the intelligence in her eyes, the quick mind that grasped implications faster than she spoke them. She would be useful, yes, but she would also be interesting, and that was far more dangerous. He had not felt interested in centuries. Obereth returned to his chair and picked up the contract they had signed, reading it over again. Binding, yes, but also protective. He had given her every safeguard he could think of, every clause that would ensure her autonomy. He had made sure she understood she could leave, could refuse, could say no. Because the alternative, taking what he wanted without regard for her will, was anathema to him. He had seen enough of that in his long existence, had fought against it often enough. He would not become the thing he despised, even if part of him wanted to keep her here, wanted to wrap her in protection so complete she would never need to fear anything again, even if her heartbeat in the next room made him feel something he had not felt in a very, very long time. He forced those thoughts away and turned his attention to more practical matters. The council would not give up their hunt easily. He would need to make his protection of Viviana known, would need to establish her as under his aegis in a way that could not be misunderstood. That meant revealing himself, emerging from his self-imposed exile, stepping back into the political arena he had abandoned. For her, he found he was willing. The thought should have concerned him. Instead, he smiled into the darkness and began to plan. Viviana woke to the smell of coffee and the distant sound of movement. For a moment she thought she had dreamed everything, that she would open her eyes to her apartment and her normal life. Then she registered the stone ceiling above her, the medieval tapestry on the wall, and memory came flooding back. She was in a vampire king's underground lair. She had signed a contract in blood. Her life, as she had known it, was over. The coffee smell was real at least. She followed it out of her room and down a short corridor to find Obereth in what could only be described as a kitchen, though one that looked like it belonged in a historical drama. He was doing something at the stove, and a coffee pot sat percolating on the counter. He looked up as she entered, and she was struck again by how beautiful he was, and how utterly inhuman. In the morning light, or what passed for morning light in the underground chamber, His white hair seemed to glow, his pale skin luminous. He wore different clothes today, more modern, dark trousers and a white shirt that somehow made him look even more otherworldly. "Good morning," he said, and gestured to the coffee pot. "I thought you might appreciate that. I do not drink it myself, but I keep it for guests." "You have guests?" Viviana asked, moving to pour herself a cup. The coffee was perfect, rich and strong. "Occasionally, not recently." He turned back to the stove. "I have also made breakfast, though I cannot vouch for its quality. It has been some time since I cooked for anyone." She looked over his shoulder and saw eggs and toast, bacon crisping in a pan. It looked perfect. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." He plated the food and handed it to her. "You will need your strength for what comes next." That sounded ominous. Viviana took the plate to the small table and sat, and he joined her with a cup of something dark that was definitely not coffee. "What comes next?" she asked, between bites of breakfast that was impossibly delicious. "I make my protection of you official. I inform the council that you are under my aegis and that any action against you is an action against me." He sipped his drink, watching her. "They will not be pleased." "Will they fight you?" "No. I am older than any of them, more powerful, and they remember well enough what happens to those who challenge me directly." No arrogance in the words, just statement of fact. "But they will maneuver, will test the boundaries, will seek ways to undermine the protection without breaking it openly. So I'll still be in danger. Less danger than you were." He set down his cup. "But yes, there will be risks. I will do everything in my power to minimize them, but I cannot eliminate them entirely. Not yet." Viviana processed that. What would eliminate them? Marriage. She choked on her coffee. What? An old law rarely invoked but still binding. A human who marries into vampire nobility becomes untouchable by council decree. The union makes you family, and family cannot be executed without trial and overwhelming evidence of treason. He spoke calmly, as though discussing the weather. "It would make you absolutely safe." "I'm not marrying you," Viviana said flatly, heat flooding her face. "I am not asking you to." Something flickered in his expression, there and gone. "Merely explaining the options. Political marriage is a tool, nothing more. But it is not one I would employ without your full and genuine consent, which I do not have and do not expect to receive." She studied him, trying to read behind the careful neutrality. "Have you ever been married?" "Twice. Once for love, long ago, before I was turned. She died of plague." No emotion in his voice, but she sensed old grief beneath the words. "Once politically, to cement an alliance between territories. It was—" He paused, considering. "Cordial. She took other lovers, as did I. We parted amicably when the alliance no longer required the marriage. Do you want to marry again?" "I have not wanted anything in a very long time, Viviana." He met her eyes. "Not until yesterday." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Viviana forced herself to look away, to focus on her breakfast, to ignore the way her heart had started beating faster. Dangerous. This was dangerous. "Tell me about the codex," Obereth said, changing the subject smoothly. "What exactly did you find?" Grateful for the shift, Viviana explained in detail. The genealogies that contradicted the council's official histories, showing different bloodlines, different origins, the references to multiple vampire races, not the single pure lineage the council claimed, the hints of a great war, a purge, a rewriting of history. He listened intently, asking pointed questions, filling in gaps with his own knowledge. The council claims to be descended from the first blood, the original vampires created by ancient magic. They use this lineage to justify their authority, their right to make and enforce laws. But the codex shows that isn't true, Viviana said. Or not entirely true. There were multiple first-generation vampires from different sources, different kinds of magic. The council's ancestors were just one group among many. And the other groups? Destroyed, apparently, or driven into hiding. There are references to tribunals, executions, entire bloodlines wiped out. She pulled out her phone, called up the photos she had saved. Look at this section. It lists names, territories, dates of death. Hundreds of vampires, all killed within a span of 50 years. Obereth took the phone, his fingers careful on the modern device. She watched his expression shift as he read, saw something cold and terrible enter his eyes. "The Purge of 1723, he said softly. "I was in the Far East at the time, dealing with other matters. When I returned, the council had consolidated power, and half the noble houses I had known were gone. They told me there had been a plague, a curse that killed selectively." His jaw tightened. They lied. "This was genocide," Viviana said quietly. "Political genocide, wiping out rival bloodlines and rewriting history to justify it." "Yes?" He handed back her phone, his movements very controlled. "And this is why they hunt you so desperately. This knowledge would shatter their authority, would turn every vampire not of council blood against them. It would mean war." "I'm sorry," she said, though she was not sure what she was apologizing for. "I didn't mean to start a war." "You did not start it. You merely revealed it." He rose and paced to the window, his movements too smooth, too controlled. Anger, she realized. He was absolutely furious, holding it in check by sheer will. 300 years I have walked this earth, and I did not see. I did not question. I accepted their lies because I was too tired, too withdrawn, too willing to let others handle the politics I found distasteful. You couldn't have known. I should have. He turned back to face her. I am called a king. I claim authority over territories and people. I should have known what was done in my name, what blood built the system I tacitly supported by my inaction. Viviana stood and went to him, acting on instinct. She put a hand on his arm, felt the tension coiled there like a spring. You know now. You can do something about it now. He looked down at her, and for a moment his control slipped. She saw rage there, and grief, and something that might have been shame. Then it smoothed away, hidden behind that perfect mask. Yes, I can do something now. His hand covered hers, cool fingers gentle. Thank you, Viviana, for finding this, for bringing it to light, even accidentally. I just read a book. You did far more than that. He smiled, a small, real smile that transformed his face. Come, we have work to do. They spent the day in his study, a room lined with books and scrolls and artifacts that made Viviana's academic heart sing. He showed her his own collection, centuries of accumulated knowledge, and together they cross-referenced what she had found in the codex with his personal records. A picture emerged, piece by piece. The council had not always ruled vampire kind. Once there had been a dozen powerful houses, each with their own territories, their own laws, their own ways. The council had been merely one voice among many, advisory rather than absolute. Then had come the purge, systematic and ruthless. Houses eliminated one by one, their members killed or forced to submit. In the chaos that followed, the council had seized control, rewritten the histories, established themselves as the sole authority. And everyone had believed them, because who would question the victors? We need more, Obereth said, studying the timeline they had built. The codex gives us the what, but not the how. How did they manage it? What magic or weapons did they use? Who helped them? There must be other sources, Viviana said. Other documents, other witnesses. Witnesses. He looked up sharply. You are right. There must be survivors, those who lived through the purge and remember. If I can find them, convince them to speak. The council will know what you are doing. Let them. That cold smile again. I am done with discretion. Over the following days, Viviana fell into a rhythm that felt surreal in its domesticity. She woke in her underground room, had breakfast with a vampire king, spent her days researching ancient vampire history, her evenings in conversation that ranged from academic to personal to somewhere in between. Obereth was brilliant, she discovered. His mind was sharp and quick, able to make connections she missed, to see patterns in the chaos. But he was also surprisingly easy to talk to once you got past the intimidation factor. He listened when she spoke, remembered details she mentioned in passing, asked questions that showed genuine interest. And he was kind in ways she had not expected. He made sure she ate, that she rested, that she had everything she needed. He never pushed, never demanded, never used his power or position to pressure her. He treated her as an equal, a partner in their research, and that more than anything made her lower her guard, which was dangerous, because she was also starting to notice other things. The way he moved, all grace and controlled power. The sound of his voice, that accent that made even mundane words sound elegant. The way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, with an intensity that made her breath catch. She was attracted to him. Impossible, ridiculous, inappropriate, but undeniably true. She was attracted to a vampire king who had lived for 3 centuries, who could kill her without effort, who was so far beyond her in power and knowledge that they might as well be different species. Except when they were working together, heads bent over some ancient text, and he explained something with such enthusiasm that he forgot to be inhuman. Except when he made some dry observation that made her laugh, and his eyes lit with pleasure at the sound. Except when their hands brushed by accident, and he pulled away so carefully, so determined not to impose. She was in so much trouble. A week after their first meeting, everything changed. Viviana was working in the study, translating a passage from medieval Latin, when Obereth appeared in the doorway, moving faster than usual. "We have visitors," he said, his voice tight. "Council representatives under a flag of truce. They wish to negotiate." Her heart lurched. "About me?" "Almost certainly." He crossed to her in 2 strides. "You do not have to face them. I can handle this alone." "No." Viviana stood, squaring her shoulders. "I want to be there. They're coming because of me. I should face them." He studied her for a long moment. "You are certain?" "Yes." "Very well." He offered his arm, formal and old-fashioned. "Then let us see what the council wants." The meeting took place in the main chamber, the space transformed. Obereth had arranged it like a throne room, his chair elevated slightly, candles positioned to cast him in dramatic light. Psychology, Viviana realized. He was reminding them of his power, his status, forcing them to come to him on his territory. The council representatives arrived precisely on time, 3 of them, all vampires. 2 men and a woman, all dressed in formal black, all radiating cold authority. They stopped at the edge of the candlelight, taking in the scene, taking in Viviana standing beside Obereth's chair. The woman stepped forward. "Lord Obereth, it has been many years." "Lady Isolde." Obereth's voice was perfectly neutral. "I would say it is good to see you, but we have never been friends." "No," she agreed. "We have not. Yet we have always dealt honestly with one another. I hope that can continue." "That depends on what you have come to say." Isolde's gaze shifted to Viviana, cold and assessing. "We have come about the girl." "Miss Nell," Obereth corrected. "She has a name. Use it." A slight tightening around Isolde's mouth. "Miss Nell, then. She has violated the first law. The penalty is clear. The first law states that humans who discover our existence without permission must be silenced. It does not specify how." Obereth leaned back in his chair, radiating casual power. "I have silenced her. She is under my protection, bound by contract not to reveal what she knows to the human world. The law is satisfied." "The law requires her death," one of the men said, his voice flat. "The law requires her silence. I have ensured it." Obereth's eyes glinted red in the candlelight. "Or are you suggesting that my word is insufficient?" Silence. The council representatives exchanged glances. Challenging Obereth's word was tantamount to calling him a liar, which would mean a duel, which none of them would survive. "Of course not," Isolde said smoothly. "Your word is beyond question. However, the knowledge she has already disseminated, the photographs of restricted documents, pose a continued threat." "That is a separate issue," Obereth said, "and one I am prepared to address. Miss Nell will work with me to track down and eliminate every copy of the sensitive material. It will take time, but it will be done. Work with you. Isolde's gaze sharpened. In what capacity? As my researcher and advisor. He said it calmly, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She has skills I find useful, and I have need of current information about the modern world and its systems. Another exchange of glances. The council would like to question her, the second man said. To verify her story, to understand the scope of the breach. No. Obereth's voice went cold. She is under my protection. You will not touch her, question her, or approach her without my explicit permission. If you have questions, you may ask me, and I will determine if and how to answer. That is not acceptable, Isolde said, and Viviana heard the steel beneath the politeness. It is the only option I am offering. Obereth stood, and even though he made no threatening move, all three council representatives tensed. Viviana Nell is mine to protect. You have no claim on her, no authority over her. She sought sanctuary in my resting place, and by the oldest of our laws, I am bound to shelter her. Challenge that, if you dare. The silence stretched out, taut and dangerous. Finally, Isolde inclined her head, the barest acknowledgement. We do not challenge your right to offer protection, but the council is not satisfied that the threat has been contained. The council's satisfaction is not my concern. Obereth moved to stand beside Viviana, a clear statement of solidarity. I have stated my terms. Accept them or leave. Isolde's eyes narrowed. You are making an enemy of the council, Lord Obereth. The council has made an enemy of truth, he replied. I am simply choosing which side I stand on. The words carried weight that Viviana did not fully understand, but the council representatives clearly did. Their expressions shuddered, became masks. We will convey your position, Isolde said finally, but this matter is not closed. I expected nothing less. Obereth gestured toward the door. You know the way out. They left in silence, cold and controlled. When the door closed behind them, Viviana felt her knees go weak. She sat down hard, her hands shaking. Obereth was beside her immediately, kneeling so they were at eye level. Are you all right? They wanted to kill me, she whispered. I could feel it. Yes, they did. His hands closed over hers, warm and steady. But they will not. I will not allow it. You just made yourself a target. For me, for a human you barely know. I made myself a target for the truth, he corrected. You are simply the catalyst, and I have known you for a week now. That is no longer barely. She wanted to laugh at the absurdity of that statement, but she could not quite manage it. What happens now? Now we continue our work. We find the evidence we need to expose the council's crimes. We build alliances with the other houses, the ones they did not manage to destroy. He smiled, sharp and dangerous, and we make them regret ever drawing my attention. Over the following weeks, Obereth reached out to contacts he had not spoken to in decades. Old vampires, powerful ones, those who remembered the world before the council's rise to absolute power. Some refused to speak with him. Others listened, intrigued, willing to at least hear what he had to say. Viviana worked alongside him, researching, compiling evidence, preparing arguments. She had never imagined her academic skills would be used like this, to build a case against an immortal shadow government. But she threw herself into it with everything she had, driven by the need to prove herself useful, to justify Obereth's protection, to be worthy of the trust he had placed in her. And somewhere in the midst of all that work, something shifted between them. It was small things at first. The way he started bringing her coffee in the morning without being asked, the way she learned to read his moods, to know when he needed silence and when he wanted conversation. The way they fell into a comfortable rhythm, moving around each other in the study like dancers who had rehearsed the steps. Then larger things. The night she fell asleep over her research and woke to find herself in her bed, tucked in carefully, with no memory of getting there. The evening he told her about his human life, about the family he had loved and lost, speaking of griefs 300 years old as though they still hurt. The moment she realized she was not afraid of him anymore, had not been afraid for weeks, and the moment he realized it too, the night he almost kissed her. They had been working late, following a lead about a vampire who claimed to have witnessed the purge firsthand. The research had hit a dead end, and Viviana had thrown down her pen in frustration. Obereth had looked up from his own work, had seen her expression, and had started laughing. It was the first time she had heard him truly laugh, not the polite amusement he sometimes showed, but genuine mirth. The sound transformed him, made him seem younger, more alive. She had stared, captivated, and when he noticed he had gone still. They looked at each other across the desk, and something electric passed between them. He stood, and she stood, and he was suddenly very close, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker red in his eyes, could feel the cold heat radiating from him. "Viviana," he said softly, and it was a question, an offer, a plea all at once. She swayed toward him, drawn by something she could not name. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing over her skin with aching gentleness. Then he pulled back, putting distance between them with clear effort. "Forgive me. That was inappropriate." "Was it?" She was proud that her voice remained steady. "You are under my protection. There is a power imbalance between us, in 100 different ways. I will not take advantage of that. What if I wanted you to?" He closed his eyes, and she saw something like pain cross his face. "You are brilliant and brave and beautiful, and I have lived for 300 years waiting to meet someone like you. But you came to me seeking safety, and I will not abuse that trust. I will not make you feel obligated, will not put you in a position where you cannot say no." Viviana wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that she was choosing this, that the attraction was real and mutual and had nothing to do with obligation. But part of her recognized the wisdom in his restraint, the care behind it. "All right," she said quietly. "But for the record, I would say yes." His eyes opened, burning into hers. "When this is over," he said, his voice rough, "when you are safe and no longer dependent on my protection, ask me again, and I will give you an answer that has nothing to do with duty or obligation." It was a promise, and it settled over her like a vow. 2 months after Viviana had stumbled into Obereth's sarcophagus, everything came to a head. They had gathered evidence, had compiled a case that was damning in its thoroughness. They had found survivors of the purge willing to testify, had secured documents that corroborated the codex, had built a coalition of vampire houses willing to stand against the council. The council, predictably, had not been idle. They had tried to undermine Obereth's credibility, had spread rumors that he was being manipulated by a human, that he had grown weak in his isolation. They had attempted to bribe his allies, threaten his supporters, isolate him politically. None of it had worked. Obereth was too old, too powerful, too respected for their tactics to gain real traction. And with every move they made against him, more vampires began to question the council's authority, to wonder what they were so desperate to hide. The final confrontation took place in the Grand Hall, a neutral space beneath the city where vampire politics had been conducted for centuries. Obereth had called for a formal tribunal, demanding that the council answer for their crimes in front of the assembled houses. They could not refuse without admitting guilt. So they came, all 12 council members, in their formal regalia, radiating cold authority. Viviana stood with Obereth, dressed in formal clothing he had provided, trying not to show how terrified she was. The hall was filled with vampires, hundreds of them, all ancient, all powerful, all watching her with varying degrees of curiosity and hostility. "This is irregular," Isolde said, speaking for the council. "To call a tribunal without proper notice, to make accusations without substantiation, to bring a human into our spaces. I have given notice, I have provided substantiation, and the human is here as my witness and advisor," Obereth replied calmly. "Everything is according to the old laws, the ones that predate the council's authority. Or do you claim those laws no longer apply?" Isolde's jaw tightened. "What are your accusations?" "That the council seized power through genocide, that you systematically eliminated rival bloodlines, and then rewrote history to justify your authority. that you enforce laws designed to protect not our kind, but your power." Obereth's voice carried through the hall, clear and unwavering. "I accuse you of 3 centuries of tyranny built on a foundation of lies and blood." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Then one of the council members laughed, a cold sound without humor. "Prove it," Obereth smiled. "Gladly." What followed was a presentation that would have done credit to any academic conference. Viviana had helped him prepare it, had organized the evidence, had coached him on modern presentation techniques. He laid it out piece by piece, document by document, testimony by testimony. The genealogies that showed bloodlines eliminated, the dates that correlated with known disappearances, the survivors who came forward one by one to describe what they had witnessed. The council tried to refute it, but their arguments grew weaker with each new piece of evidence. They claimed the documents were forgeries, but experts verified their authenticity. They claimed the witnesses were lying, but the details matched too perfectly. The stories corroborated each other too completely. By the time Obereth finished, the mood in the hall had shifted. Vampires who had entered skeptical were now looking at the council with doubt, with anger, with betrayal. "Even if these accusations are true," Isolde said, her composure cracking, "it was necessary. The houses were at war, tearing each other apart. The council brought peace, order, stability." "You brought tyranny," Obereth said quietly. "You built your peace on the bones of my friends, my allies, my people, and you did it in secret, rewriting history so that none of us would know to question you." "What would you have us do?" another council member demanded. "Abdicate? Disband? Throw vampire kind into chaos?" "I would have you answer for your crimes," Obereth replied. "I would have you face justice, as any of us would be required to do. I would have you step down from power you seized through murder and allow proper governance to be established." "And who would govern?" Isolde asked. "You?" "A council, yes, but one chosen by the houses, not self-appointed. One with term limits, with checks on its power, with transparency in its actions." He gestured to the assembled vampires. "We are immortal, but that does not mean we cannot change, cannot grow, cannot build something better than what we have." The debate raged for hours. The council fought, argued, tried every rhetorical tactic they knew, but the evidence was overwhelming, and the political will had turned against them. One by one, the assembled houses voted to strip the council of absolute authority, to demand accountability, to restructure vampire governance. When it was over, when the votes had been counted and the decision made final, Isolde looked at Obereth with something like grudging respect. "You have won," she said quietly. "I hope you are prepared for what comes next." "I am," he replied. "Are you?" She did not answer, simply turned and left, the other council members following. The hall erupted in conversation, vampires clustering in groups, already beginning the negotiations and politics that would shape the new order. Obereth stood in the center of it all, accepting congratulations, fielding questions, managing the chaos with practiced ease. Viviana watched from the sidelines, overwhelmed and amazed. They had done it. Against all odds, against an enemy that had ruled for centuries, they had done it. Obereth found her in the crowd, his eyes seeking hers. He excused himself from the conversation he was having and crossed to her in a few strides. "Are you well?" "I think so." She was shaking, she realized. Adrenaline crash, probably. "We won." "We did." His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Thanks to you. None of this would have been possible without your research, your courage, your refusal to stay silent. I just found a book. You did so much more than that." He pulled her closer, heedless of the watching vampires. "You changed everything, Viviana. You changed the world." She looked up at him, at this impossibly ancient, impossibly powerful being who had protected her, worked with her, treated her as an equal. "What happens now?" "Now we build something new." He smiled, warm and real. "And you are free. The council is broken, their authority over you dissolved. You can leave, return to your human life, go anywhere you wish. You are no longer in danger." It was everything she should have wanted. Freedom, safety, her life back. Instead, Viviana felt her heart clench with something like grief. And if I don't want to leave? Obereth went very still. What? You said when this was over, when I was safe, I could ask again. She took a breath, gathering her courage. I'm asking. I don't want to leave. I want to stay with you, if you'll have me. Not as your employee or your protected human. As something else. Something more. For a long moment he simply stared at her, and she could not read his expression. Then, very carefully, he cupped her face in both hands. You are certain. You could have any life you want now. You could return to your studies, your career. You could be free of all of this. I don't want to be free of you, she said simply. These past months, working with you, being with you, it's been the most alive I've ever felt. I don't want to give that up. I am a vampire, he said softly. I am immortal, and you are human. I will watch you age and die, and it will destroy me. Are you prepared for that? Are you prepared to miss whatever time we could have because you're afraid of losing me eventually? She covered his hands with hers. I'd rather have 50 years with you than forever without you. Something in his expression cracked, and she saw the longing beneath, the hope he had been holding back. Viviana, I have lived for 3 centuries, and I have never felt for anyone what I feel for you. You terrify me. The thought of losing you terrifies me, but the thought of letting you go without even trying is worse. Then don't let me go, she whispered. He kissed her then, finally, in front of hundreds of vampires and God and everyone, kissed her like she was precious and vital and everything he had been waiting for. His lips were cool, but his touch was gentle, reverent, full of all the feeling he had been holding back for months. When they finally broke apart, Viviana was aware of the absolute silence in the hall, the hundreds of eyes watching them. She should have been embarrassed. Instead, she laughed, giddy with joy and relief. Obereth smiled against her hair, holding her close. I hope you know what you are getting into, little scholar. Vampire politics are complicated, and being involved with me will make you a target. I think I can handle it, she said. I've already survived being hunted by the council. How much worse can it be? Do not tempt fate, he murmured, but he was smiling, truly smiling, in a way she had never seen before. Around them, the assembled vampires were beginning to react. Some looked shocked, some amused, some calculating. But Obereth ignored them all. His attention focused entirely on Viviana. Come, he said, taking her hand. Let us leave the politics for tomorrow. Tonight, I want to show you something. He led her out of the grand hall, through passages she had never seen, up and up until they emerged onto a rooftop somewhere in the old quarter. The sun had set hours ago, and the city sparkled below them, lights stretching to the horizon. I have not watched the city like this in decades, Obereth said, standing beside her at the edge. I had forgotten how beautiful it could be. Why did you withdraw? Viviana asked, the question that had been in the back of her mind for months. Why hide away for 100 years? He was quiet for a long moment. I was tired. Tired of the politics, the constant maneuvering, the games. I had lived so long, seen so much, and it all began to feel meaningless. So I withdrew, thinking I would rest for a while, and the while became decades, became a century. He looked at her. And then you fell into my sarcophagus and woke me up in more ways than one. I'm glad I did, Viviana said softly. So am I. He pulled her against his side, his arm around her shoulders. I have a question for you, and I want you to answer honestly. All right. Do you want to stay human? She blinked, surprised by the question. What? Immortality is possible for you. I could turn you, make you vampire. You would have centuries, not decades. We would have time, real time. His voice was carefully neutral. But it is not a decision to make lightly. You would lose the sun, would lose aspects of your humanity. You would become something other than what you are. Viviana considered it seriously, running through the implications. Can I think about it? Of course, there is no rush. I simply wanted you to know the option exists. He kissed the top of her head. I will care for you regardless, human or vampire. That does not change. They stood together in silence, watching the city lights, and Viviana felt a peace settle over her that she had not known she was missing. For the first time in months, she was not running, not hiding, not afraid. She was simply here, with someone who cared for her, who valued her, who wanted her for who she was rather than what she could provide. It was more than she had ever expected to find. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. The council was formally disbanded, its members facing tribunals for their crimes. A new governance structure was established, with representatives elected from each major house, term limits imposed, transparency required. It was messy and complicated and imperfect, but it was progress. Obereth was at the center of it all, helping to build the new order, mediating disputes, using his authority and respect to keep the peace. Viviana worked beside him, providing research and analysis, helping to draft new laws based on historical precedent, serving as a bridge between vampire politics and modern sensibilities. They made an odd pair, the ancient vampire king and the human scholar, but they made it work. Viviana brought him into the modern world, teaching him about technology and social media and contemporary politics. He gave her access to centuries of knowledge, introduced her to vampires who had witnessed history firsthand, opened doors she had never imagined, and somewhere in the midst of all that work, they built a life together. Viviana kept her apartment in the city, but she spent most nights in Obereth's underground residence. They fell into a comfortable domesticity that felt surreal in its normalcy. Mornings spent in research, evenings in conversation, nights in each other's arms. He learned to cook more than just breakfast, taking an inexplicable pleasure in mastering modern recipes. She learned vampire history and politics, becoming a recognized expert in her own right. 6 months after the tribunal, Obereth took her to meet his family. I thought you said they were dead, Viviana said, confused. My human family, yes. But I have a vampire brother, a sister, several nieces and nephews. He smiled at her expression. I turned them, over the centuries, individuals I cared for, who I could not bear to lose to time. They will want to meet you. The family gathering was held in a castle in Eastern Europe, a sprawling Gothic pile that had been in Obereth's line for centuries. Viviana met vampires who had been alive during the Renaissance, who had fought in wars she had only read about, who treated her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. His brother, a vampire named Lucien, pulled her aside at one point. He is different with you, he said, studying her. Lighter, happier. I have not seen him like this in 200 years. He makes me happy too, Viviana said simply. Good. Lucien smiled, and she could see the family resemblance, the same sharp features, the same elegant bearing. Then you are welcome in this family, human or not. It was an acceptance she had not known she needed, and it settled something in her chest. A year after they met, Obereth took Viviana back to the crypt where his sarcophagus stood. She had not been back since that first terrifying night, and seeing it again brought back a flood of memories. I have been thinking about your question, she said, looking at the carved stone, about immortality. He tensed slightly beside her. And? I want it. Not now, not immediately. But eventually, yes. I want the time with you. I want to see where this goes, where we go, without the clock ticking down. She turned to face him. I want forever if you're offering it. The smile that broke across his face was radiant. I am offering it, gladly, joyfully, whenever you are ready. Not yet, she said. I want to live as a human a bit longer, accomplish some things, say some goodbyes. But soon, in the next few years. I will wait as long as you need, he promised. I have all the time in the world. She kissed him then, there in the crypt where they had first met, and it felt like coming full circle. They married 2 years after Viviana had stumbled into Obereth's coffin, in a ceremony that blended human and vampire traditions. It was small, private, just close friends and family, held in the underground cathedral that served as Obereth's home. Viviana wore white, because she liked the tradition, and Obereth wore black and silver, his white hair braided with intricate care. They exchanged vows written by themselves, promises of partnership and respect and love that would endure beyond time. When the officiant pronounced them married, Obereth kissed her with a gentleness that made her heart ache, and she knew she had made the right choice. The reception was a lively affair, vampires and a handful of humans mingling together, celebrating this odd union. Viviana's academic advisor was there, one of the few humans she had told the truth, looking both delighted and slightly terrified. Lucien gave a toast that was equal parts touching and embarrassing. The night stretched into dawn, though the party continued underground, unaffected by the sun. At some point, Obereth pulled her aside into a quiet corner away from the celebration. "Are you happy?" he asked, his hands framing her face. "Incredibly," she said honestly. "Are you?" "More than I have words for." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Thank you for choosing this, for choosing me. Thank you for protecting me, for seeing me as more than a problem to solve." She smiled up at him. "Thank you for holding me closer instead of pushing me away." He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "How could I do anything else? You quite literally fell into my arms. Fate was being painfully obvious. Good thing one of us was paying attention." They returned to the party hand in hand, to celebrate with the people who mattered to them, to dance and laugh and revel in the joy of this impossible thing they had built together. 3 years after they married, 5 years after Viviana had fled into an old mansion and hidden in a vampire king's coffin, she decided she was ready. Obereth made the preparations carefully, consulting with older vampires, ensuring he understood the process completely. Turning a human was not something to be done lightly, and he wanted no mistakes, no complications. They chose the anniversary of the day they met, a bit of symmetry that pleased them both. Viviana spent the day saying private goodbyes to her human life, to the son she would no longer see, to the mortality she was choosing to leave behind. She was ready, had been ready for a while, but the finality of it still deserved acknowledgement. That night, in the same chamber where they had been married, with only Lucien present as witness, Obereth transformed her. It was not gentle. Vampire venom was designed to kill, and turning required taking the human to the edge of death and pulling them back. Viviana had known it would hurt, had been warned, but the reality was worse than anything she had imagined. Fire in her veins, her body tearing itself apart and rebuilding. Through it all, Obereth held her, murmuring comfort and encouragement, his voice an anchor in the pain. And Lucien was there too, steady and calm, helping Obereth monitor the transformation, ensuring it proceeded correctly. She did not know how long it lasted. Hours, maybe. Days, possibly. Time lost meaning in the pain. But eventually the fire began to fade, replaced by a cold clarity, a sharpness to her senses that was almost overwhelming. Viviana opened her eyes, and the world had changed. She could see every detail of the chamber, could pick out individual grains in the stone walls, could hear Obereth's breathing, could smell the candles burning, could sense Lucien standing across the room. Everything was sharper, clearer, more, and she was starving. "Easy," Obereth said, his voice cutting through the hunger haze. "I have you. We prepared for this." He helped her sit up, brought her a glass of dark liquid. Blood, she realized. Human blood, ethically sourced, he had assured her. She drank without thinking, and the hunger eased, the clarity increased. "How do you feel?" Obereth asked, watching her carefully. Viviana took stock. Strong, faster. Her body felt different, denser, more efficient. The ache in her knees from an old injury was gone. Her vision was perfect without her glasses. She felt powerful in a way she never had as a human. "Different," she said, and was startled by her own voice, by the way she could hear the harmonics in it. "Very different." He smiled, relief evident in his expression. "The worst is over. The next few weeks will be an adjustment, learning your new abilities, your new limitations. But you will adapt." "Will I miss the sun?" "Probably. Most of us do, at first." His hand found hers, and she could feel the coolness of his skin now, could sense that he was the same temperature as her. "But there are compensations. Like forever with you, like forever with me," he agreed. Lucian approached, smiling. "Welcome to the family, little sister. Officially this time." Viviana laughed, the sound strange and musical to her new ears. She had done it, had chosen this path, this life, this eternity. There would be challenges ahead, she knew. Learning to control her new nature, navigating vampire society as one of them rather than an outsider, dealing with the reality of immortality. But she would face it all with Obereth beside her, and that made it worthwhile. They spent the next months helping Viviana adjust to her new existence. Obereth taught her to control her strength, to manage the hunger, to move through the world without revealing what she was. Lucian helped her develop her new senses, teaching her tricks and techniques he had learned over his own centuries. And gradually, Viviana found her footing. She returned to her research with new vigor, able to work through the night without tiring, able to read texts in complete darkness, able to remember details with perfect clarity. Her work on vampire history became definitive, respected across the community. She and Obereth became partners in truth, equals in a way that had been impossible when she was human and fragile. They worked together on the new governance structures, on preserving knowledge, on building bridges between vampire and human societies, and they were happy. Genuinely, deeply happy, in a way that felt miraculous given how they had started. 10 years after Viviana had hidden in a vampire king's coffin, they stood together on the same rooftop where Obereth had first spoken to her of immortality, watching the city lights sparkle in the darkness. "Do you ever regret it?" Obereth asked, the question that had been unspoken between them. "Choosing this? Giving up your humanity?" Viviana considered it seriously as she always did when he asked. "Sometimes I miss small things. Coffee tastes different now. I miss being able to go out in daylight without preparations. I miss the simplicity of my old life. But I would make the same choice again in a heartbeat." She leaned into his side, his arm coming around her automatically. "I have centuries ahead of me with you. I have work that matters, a family that accepts me, a life richer than anything I could have imagined. How could I regret that?" "You are everything I did not know I needed," Obereth said softly. "Everything I had stopped hoping existed. When you fell into my coffin that night, terrified and desperate, I thought you were simply an interesting problem to solve. I did not realize you were the answer to a question I had stopped asking." "What question?" "Whether eternity was worth living." He turned to face her fully, his hands cupping her face. "You make it worth living, Viviana. You make every night an adventure, every moment precious. You brought me back to life in ways that have nothing to do with waking from sleep." She kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude and joy into it. "Then we're even, because you saved my life in every way that matters." They stood together in the darkness, two immortals who had found each other by the most unlikely chance, and watched the city sleep below them. Somewhere out there, humans were living their brief, bright lives, unaware of the ancient world that existed alongside theirs. Somewhere, other vampires were engaged in their eternal politics and games. But here, in this moment, there were just the two of them, partners and lovers and friends, with all the time in the world to explore what they could become together. Viviana had hidden in a vampire king's coffin to escape her pursuers, expecting to find death in the darkness. Instead, she had found love, purpose, and a future beyond anything she had dared to dream. And Obereth, ancient and powerful and alone for so long, had woken to find the one thing he had never expected. Someone who saw past his power to the person beneath, who challenged him and matched him and chose him, not out of fear or obligation, but genuine desire. Together, they had changed their world, had brought down a corrupt government, had rebuilt vampire society, had proven that even the oldest, most entrenched systems could be transformed with enough courage and determination. But more than that, they had found each other, had built something precious and real from the most unlikely beginning. Had proven that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we are most vulnerable, most afraid, most desperate. Sometimes all you need is to take a chance, to trust a stranger in the darkness, to believe that protection offered is protection meant. Sometimes the monster in the coffin turns out to be exactly what you need, and sometimes, hiding in the darkness, you find the light you did not know you were seeking. They would face challenges ahead, Viviana knew. Immortality was not simple, and their world was still finding its balance. But they would face it together, as partners, as equals, as two people who had chosen each other against all odds and all reason. And that, she thought as Obereth pulled her closer, as his lips found hers again, as the night stretched out endless and full of possibility before them, was more than enough. It was everything.